Alright, well welcome to my shop, and I thought what I'd do first is give you all kind of a brief overview of the kind of bars and cutters that I've been making, and before we get into it. But it's been easy to do, and sometimes I might be halfway through turning something, needed a little different hook to get it in and around, and I'll just stop and make one. But that's just me. But generally with the hollowing, as y'all know, I use the Clark system, which can get me in deep, but all of these tools generally are for the top of it when you're trying to get across that ledge and into the sides. But what I do here with the hook tools, and these are all removable, so I can replace them into different handles and different bents. Then I've got these are all replaceable. These are a little bit different because, as you see, this piece welded on the top, and I'll show you about that in just a second. But I've just used some different bars and made different handles. I'm pretty comfortable going down to about 12 to 14 inches by hand with no guidance, and a lot of it with a big 1-inch bar, we can do that. And then with the removable handles, I've got something I've made here for the laser, so I can spot, where your edge is, and a very easy thing to make with a little battery pack and a laser. You can get about a dozen of them on Amazon pretty cheap, and even made some very small ones to do some wine stoppers, kind of mimicking little hollow forms. And then to get a little closer in on it, the different kind of cutting heads that I use. And I think, being as Rudy's at the cameraman, he can chime in on this, but I think sometimes you get into different woods, they're wet, they're dry, and different cutters work better. And these are the more classic cutters that everybody has seen for years. And with this head, you can kind of rotate it around to wherever you're needing to cut. This is, of course, the AZ Carbide's little hogger, which works great. That little bit really tears it up. And these, I've bent different ways. This is kind of a good general tool with that little bit of a bend in it. Depending on what cutter I've got in, I can get more toward the sides and that. Of course, then the hook tools, and I've got some others, but the big 1-inch bar. And what I've done with this one, I had a good friend bore this out for a 5/8 hole so that I could add in different bits. Now this one gives me a little bit of a hook on it so that I can put in, and this is kind of typical of a couple of them, I can put in a little carbide cutter like this. Again, this is an AZ Carbide cutter, and this one, I've done things down to 25-30 inches with this, and it works great. The other one that I use most often is this Proform from Woodcut, and it just slices in. It's kind of like a hooded hook tool if you see how it's made there. And this thing works great. As a matter of fact, so good, if you're doing a little bitty opening, you probably don't want to use this, because every 30 seconds you got to clean out shavings. It makes big fluffy shavings and can really slow you down. But those are the basic cutters, and then the scraper. And I've also got one of these from AZ Carbide that's solid carbide. And all of these fit in these 5/16 inch holes that I've made in the ends of all of these, so that I can swap them out as I'm ready to use them. And I kind of showed you this already, but these bars that I make are interchangeable, so while you're working, you can go from a straight bar to a more of a swan neck, that type thing. So as I said, these are just to get around the corners and the top of the hollow form, and they work very well. And then, as I said, I made some very small ones that this is actually a piece of, the first one I tried, I'd heard about it, piece of hex wrench that bent and ground off, and this really gets around the sides of the very small ones. And again, like I said, just to make something like a little imitation hollow form. But this is what we're going to look at today. We're going to make a bar. Well, actually, it's going to be very similar to this, a little swan neck that we'll actually cut on in a little bit. But all of these are removable, and one thing I'd mention, when I do put in those set screws, I use the 1/4-28 thread rather than 1/4-20. It gives me a little more bite because you don't have a lot of material there, so you want to get as many threads in as you can. And I think that's kind of the overview of it, and we're probably going to stop a minute and we'll see if we got any questions. One other interesting option I meant to show you is a drill bit, and I discovered this. Jeff Nickel has a website, The Wooden Nickel, and you can find it on there. But he takes a drill bit and files it or grinds it basically just like you would a bowl gouge. So you get this cutting edge up here and a little cut over here, so you can actually bore in and then cut out with it, and it's very effective. I use it quite often, and this one is a little bit bigger. I couldn't find my small one right now, but I have a 5/16 hole in the end of all these, so all of these other bits, things will fit in there, so it makes it easy to change. And I've got some 5/16" drill bits that I've cut. They also just fit right in there, and I made a little sharpener that the bits will fit in the end. And just like the other jigs, you can just go over there to your Wolverine and use it to get that same kind of a cut. But this is amazingly effective at cutting, and I use this quite often too. It's just kind of whatever comes to mind and whatever's working. Okay, I thought a quick review of what you need to actually make a cutting bar with a cutter. And got them laid out here. And obviously the first thing you need when you're going to make a cutting bar is a cutter. And as I mentioned, AZ Carbide, which Ron Campbell up there has agreed, we've got a little drawing for some gift certificates for him. And by the way, he suggests please use them quickly, otherwise he's got all this liability stacked up in his computer that he doesn't know about. But anyway, the very small ones, they come in a little case like this with the screws and very nicely packed. And these are the ones that I use the most. These are about a 1/4" bit, and they, like I said, I use this on even my biggest turnings when I'm hollowing. And as I mentioned, I don't use any carbide on the outside, only the inside. But also you got the little wrenches, kind of modified hex star drives to do the screws. Then you'll need to have a drill and tap that matches each other. And I found on Amazon, and you can probably see from the instructions right here in Chinese, that this is a matched set, and actually came with the die holder, or the tap holder, and it's all the different metric sizes that you may need for other things. So there's a couple other things that I use them for, but this is very inexpensive. I mean, the whole set may be $12-15, something like that. Then the other thing, the biggest thing you need is a grinder with both a cutting disc and a grinding disc to actually cut the bars and then shape them a little bit when you get them done. And another thing that I use, because I do like to have a little bit of a slant down on my cutters, I made this little template. I drilled out some holes, 1/4", 3/8, and 1/2, so that I can actually slip a bar in there. And by the way, you will need a little 1/2" bar or whatever size bar you're going to make. And I need to file off the end of that, but this will fit through and clamp it down, and it allows me to cut a nice flat on here, and then we can go to the drill press and drill the hole, tap it, and be ready to go. Then, once all that's done, if you want to make a straight bar, that's all you need. But if you want to do a little bending, I've got a 6-block forge here, so I can crank up my handy dandy Burns-O-Matic with matte gas, which burns a little hotter. Stick it in here, and while it's in there, then the rod would go in and get heated up, and then I'll take it over here to my vise, and I just welded up this little thing to bend it. Doesn't have to be anything like this. If you just got a couple of bars or something that you can get some leverage to bend around is all you need. And having a MIG welder allows me the flexibility to screw up a whole lot of stuff from time to time. But anyway, it works real well. So we'll get into doing all of that. So let's get started. All right, we're going to get started. First thing we do, I've got a 1/2-inch rod here that's, I don't know, 10 to 12 bucks at Home Depot or your friendly Ace Hardware. And want to cut off about 15, 16 inches. And that'll give us some room to make a bend and that kind of thing. So we're going to go ahead and get this cut. Now that we've got it cut, I want to get a flat on it before we go to the drill bit, or to the drill press, excuse me. And as I mentioned, this little tool before, this will allow me to do that. And this not only will help me with the cutting, but also with getting the drill in the right placement once I get that done. But as I mentioned, I just made these holes 1/2 inch, and you want it kind of snug so it holds it tight. This one's holding it extra tight, but I just didn't want you to think that everything goes perfect all the time. So I get it on in the vise, and get it as level as I can kind of get it by eye, and that's close enough. You're not splitting hairs with all of this. But anyway, then we'll just take off a flap. I got tired of eating those sparks and had to move around a little bit. Anyway, we get that flat, kind of check it, and it'll work good. And then you mark where you want to start your hole, and you're going in at that angle, so you want a pretty good bit of bite for the screw. Get it about in the middle. And we're ready to start. All right, over here at the drill press now and get ready to set things up. And one thing you want to be very careful about doing is clamping your work down and getting it tight so it doesn't wiggle around. The other thing, when you've got your mark, just make sure that you are dead up above it. Otherwise, the drill bit can actually wiggle around and bend. Now, once I start up, it could wiggle more, and I may have to make some more adjustments. But you want to make sure you're as close to dead on as you can, and then you can get a little bit started. Okay, we're good. And then a little oil. You want to take this very slow. And I always do this before I bend or do anything else. Get this hole drilled and get it threaded. Because with these small bits and drills and the die, the threader, if you get about halfway through and break it, you got to cut it off and start again. got a problem. As I was saying, I think I may have just broken the bit in there. All right. As I was just saying, you got to be real careful with the drill. I guess I did a little bit too fast, but I don't know if you can really see it there, but the drill is just breaking through, and I suspect that's when you're most likely to get a break. So what I'm going to try doing is just, and the other thing I might suggest is having spare bits, which that's the last one I had of this. And I'm just going to grind this off to get to the open space, and I think we'll be in good shape. So we're going back over to the grinder. See, that is the tip of the drill, so we're going to see if we can just kind of get through that, because I don't think there's very much of it in there. Not quite. Just through. And it's still got plenty to thread. We still got that much, which is plenty. So now we can go right on to threading. And the threading is just like the drilling. You got to take it very slow and back off couple 3 turns in, because it will start building up debris in there, and you got to get it out. So just take it very slow, because like I said, you want to get this done first, because if you've got everything else done and then you bust this off, you got to cut it off and start all over again, if you still have a drill bit to do it with. But this is going pretty well, and we're almost through. We're through. Great. And frankly, that probably, once I got through grinding after I had the mount on it, that's probably about where the hole would have ended up being anyway, as far as depth goes. Once I get the hole drilled and threaded and ready to go, I know that looks bad on the back, but we're getting ready to grind a lot away. I'll go ahead and mount the cutter. Okay, and then we're going to grind the back of it. We'll kind of reset things right now. When I get the cutter mounted, then it kind of lets me know exactly where I need to grind to, because you want this kind of sticking out by itself. You don't want any other metal around it to keep it away from the wood. So once I get it mounted, I'll put it back into the vise so that I can sight down it. And if you're careful, you're not going to hit the cutter and damage it. You can just kind of get an old one and use it, but you just want to cut that tip off. Excuse me. You want to just cut that tip back and then just kind of grind all around it till it kind of forms to it. Yeah, then to fine tune things, I'll go to just a regular file. Again, kind of watching the line so that it's right up to the edge of the cutter. Getting out there, and I'll get back to it later after we form it, but I wanted to cut this back a little bit on the sides, and we can do that after we get it shaped. All right, we're going to get into actually bending this into a swan neck to get around the corners, and unless you've got asbestos hands, I use vice grip, and you want to get it lined up, kind of lay it flat and figure about where it's going to be straight up and down when you go over to bend it, so that you get the right force on it. But it just goes into the what do we call this thing? Forge. And what really? All right, getting ready to go to the forge, and this being the forge, I use obviously a clamp, and I do take the cutter off. You want to get rid of that, but once you've got all that done, you're about home free. So you lay it down, and you want to make sure that that's about up vertical when you clamp, so that when you go to you can kind of get a motion that will keep everything in the same plane. So basically, we just got to stick it in here. We fire up the.
Tell them how you make the forge.
Well, oh, okay, Rudy. Is there anything else? Anyway, yeah, this is just 6 fire bricks. There's a place in St. Pete that sells them. And I got some angle brackets, some all thread, 1/4 inch all thread to hold it all together so I can pick it up and move it around. But I use this, and you saw some of the other tools I used. I've been up to 3/4 inch steel with it, and it just takes a little longer to heat it up. But anyway, this one kind of locks on. Get it fired up. If I had a good cameraman, he'd be around here to show you the inside of it. But, anyway, but if you look inside, you can see where the blue flame is. I think that blue flame is about the bottom part. We're ready to down and make the first bend. It's a slow process to get a nice even curve. While that's heating up, I tell you that what you want is for the cutter needs to be in line with the axis of your basic tools, so that you don't lose the torque. You understand what I'm saying there? You want it to be in the straight line. That way you won't get it popping down or popping the other way when you do get it onto the wood. Last one. This is the crucial bend to make sure that the cutter, as I was saying, is in line, and it looks like we're good. So I think that's a pretty good shape. The other thing is to make sure it's still flat, and I can see I've messed that up just a little bit, so I'm going to have to reheat in a little. Ah, critical one to make sure that everything's laying flat. And there we go. Just to mention it one more time, the alignment. If you got a sight line down your main shaft, if you will, you want your cutter, the tip of the cutter, to be on the extension of that line so you don't get a pull this way or a pull that way. It makes it work very smoothly. So just pay attention to that when you're doing it. Or when you're buying tools, make sure that they've got that. So anyway, that's it. I got to go cool this thing down and it's ready to turn.